And now, as we move forward with today's agenda, to set the context a bit more, I want to share some thoughts. In the book, Why Nations Fail, it is argued that the violence and bloodshed in our history has embedded itself into the psyche of our people, contributing to the challenges faced over the last few generations. Today, it manifests in our governance structures and practices and is exhibited in high levels of crime, corruption, weak government institutions, and even poor corporate behavior. The Smart States Club, a book written by a former president of Armenia, published in January 2024 on how small states can change the world, offers a shining light for the future. In his book, Mr. Armen Sarkisian gives a personal account of his interactions with leaders of these small countries, which have dealt with similar adversity as us, but which currently prosper because of choices made by their leaders to make a positive difference. These include Botswana in Africa, Ireland in Europe, and Qatar in the Middle East, as well as his country of Armenia, which had been under Russian control as part of the USSR. Each of these countries have demonstrated how possible it is to emerge victorious despite adversity and limiting beliefs, which is another way to say mental slavery. Today, our world requires us to be innovative, creative, and brave, but more so to act with integrity and honor in bringing the kinds of changes so necessary to save the planet and make people's lives better. As we focus on our theme of regenerative capitalism, promoting exceptional governance for small states, we are encouraged to think about how each of us can individually, positively impact our world. For Governance Week 2024, our challenge is to address how we take charge of our destiny and build a bright future that embraces the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. This, after all, is the basis of a capitalism that does not exploit, but seeks profitable organizations that utilizes and restores resources, leaving it for future generations. And so now it is my pleasure to invite our opening presenter for this morning. As I shared earlier, Islay McGlynn is chairman of Maduro and Curiel's Bank in Curacao, and her topic is going to be growing a family-owned SME to an organization of influence. Islay retired in 2022 from a 33-year banking career with Scotiabank, a chartered bank based in Canada. Islay holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Hotel and Food Administration from the University of Guelph, an MBA from McGill University, and a Master of Information Studies from the University of Toronto. She also has the Director Designation, ICD-D, from the Institute of Corporate Directors in Canada. She has extensive knowledge of retail, small business, commercial banking business lines, as well as experience in risk management, human resources, and operations. She is the chair of the Maduro and Curiel's Bank's Supervisory Board, which is a full-service bank based in Curacao with subsidiaries across the Dutch Caribbean. And so it is with pleasure that I welcome you, Islay, and hand over the podium to you virtually so that you may share your thoughts as you deliver today's opening segment.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the invitation to participate in such an interesting event. I'm honored to speak at this conference as a representative of Maduro and Curiel's Bank, a highly successful and long-standing family-owned bank based in Curacao. And while I'm speaking to you from my home in Canada, my Zoom background is of the historic district and waterfront of Williamstad, Curaçao's capital, which is designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today is focused on governance in SMEs and family-owned businesses. In line with this, Kamala asked me to talk about how a family-owned business can successfully grow from a small or medium enterprise to become an organization of influence in its community. I look forward to sharing some of my observations with you over the next 20 to 25 minutes based on my experiences with Maduro and Curiel's Bank. Maduro and Curiel's Bank, or MCB for short, a lot easier to say, has a rich and interesting history. So how did MCB grow to become an organization of influence? Conventional wisdom is that there are many contributing factors that influence the success of family-owned and small and medium enterprise businesses. Such factors typically include a strong vision and mission, customer focus, financial discipline, strong brand identity, good community involvement, employee engagement, and quality products and services. However, in my view, it's ultimately the ability to effectively respond to shifting market needs and forces that enable family-owned businesses to become organizations of influence in their specific communities. From my involvement with MCB over the past 6 years, I'd like to highlight 4 factors that have become important to MCB's success and reflect their ability to change with the times and market demands and expectations. These factors include strong corporate governance, a clear understanding of the bank's vision, the value of partnerships, and effective leadership. But before I get too deep into the factors that have supported MCB's success, I'd like to explain the 2-tier corporate governance structure in place at MCB, which was implemented in 1996 as part of the revised Curaçao banking regulations. It's always interesting to learn about different governance models. So, unlike most companies in the Caribbean, which utilize a one-board structure where a single board is composed of both executive and non-executive directors, all banks in Curaçao use an alternative structure, which is also in place in many European countries, including the Netherlands. Known as the 2-tier system, it involves governing with 2 separate boards, each with its own distinct responsibilities. And of course, a clear understanding of the differences is important to ensure good corporate governance. MCB's supervisory board oversees and supervises the management board, which in turn is responsible for the overall conduct of the bank's affairs. The supervisory board supervises the bank's direction and its overall strategy and determines how the bank will conduct its business over the long term. In general, the supervisory board either establishes or approves and monitors the policies by which management operates. The supervisory board sets the tone and direction for the bank, and it oversees and supports management's efforts by effectively challenging their recommendations before approving them. The supervisory board also makes sure that adequate systems and controls are in place to identify and address problems before they become a threat to the bank. The supervisory board represents all stakeholders and ensures that decisions are made in their best interests. And the supervisory board is typically made up of non-executive directors who are not actively working in the business. This certainly reduces potential conflicts of interest. And while the supervisory board doesn't play any part in the day-to-day operations of the company, it does ensure operations meet both legal and ethical standards as set forth by industry regulators. The management board implements the guidance received from the supervisory board and provides insight and feedback about what's working well and where issues lie as they carry out the strategic plan. And while there are pros and cons to both the 1- and 2-tier board structure, generally the 2-tier structure is seen to offer robust oversight and a clear separation of strategic and operational responsibilities, which of course can lead to better governance. However, it can also introduce inefficiencies and complexities that slow down decision-making. There's also the risk of the supervisory board getting too involved in the managing board's responsibilities. However, this is, of course, a risk that exists for both types of governance structures. So now I'll turn to the factors that have assisted MCB's growth and success. The first is strong corporate governance practices. MCB's supervisory board consists of 12 directors. We're proud of the diversity of our supervisory board. We have a mix of entrepreneurs, bankers, and professionals, including engineers and lawyers. We have individuals from Curaçao, Aruba, Canada, the US, and Trinidad, and 45% of our board members are women, including the board chair, me, and the credit committee chair. In fact, I'm the third female board chair, having been preceded by two female family shareholders, the first being appointed in 1996 when the dual board structure was introduced. So our very first supervisory board chair was a female, and our second female board chair was appointed in 1999. Very few companies have achieved this record. We follow a robust director selection and appointment process using a skills matrix to determine where we have gaps, and we work with a consulting firm to assist with identifying the appropriate candidates in our markets. We have a well-functioning committee structure, and we also demonstrate effective challenge to management's proposals and related outcomes. The management board itself is composed of 3 managing directors who together are responsible for the day-to-day bank operations, developing and executing policies and procedures, and ensuring the bank is financially sound. And our corporate secretary, Carissa Sendar, who many of you will be familiar with as a street speaker at other CCGI events, ensures both boards adhere to our regulatory and bank charter processes and generally keeps us all on track. The second factor for MCB's success relates to the clarity of its vision. MCB opened its doors in January 1917 as Maduro's Bank in Curacao, and it was founded by 2 Curacao-based trading companies who saw the need for a new bank on the island. Early on, the bank became very popular with small depositors who saw the bank as stable and a trustworthy organization. Those core deposits that continue to this day have enabled MCB to maintain a sound and stable balance sheet over the past 107 years. Maduro's Bank concentrated on offering the right products, providing competitive rates, and giving highly personalized service to its clientele, all approaches that continue today. However, the client experience is evolving. Clients are increasingly sophisticated and have higher expectations of how they want to bank. We see this especially with Dutch citizens who own homes on the islands or who have other interests on the islands. However, as much as some clients want a full digital experience and the ability to self-serve, other clients highly value the branch network and the ability to speak to a person while doing their banking. A balance must be maintained. The tensions inherent in this push and pull requires MCB supervisory and management boards to find new ways to sustain critical client and community interactions. The MCB group of companies currently consists of approximately 1,300 employees based in 12 companies operating local and international businesses on the 6 islands of the Dutch Caribbean, with offices and branches based in Curacao, Aruba, St. Martin, Bonaire, St. Eustatius, and an ATM on Saba. MCB is the largest private employer and the largest bank domiciled in the Dutch Caribbean. It is also important to note that MCB has been focused on the tenets of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, long before ESG became a thing. As a family-owned bank, MCB has always understood the importance of safeguarding the islands, helping those in need, and ensuring the ongoing stability of the bank through good governance. Companies absolutely benefit from having a clear vision and mission. Knowing what you stand for and what you value enables company leadership and the supervisory board to make the right decisions. These values help guide the bank when challenges are faced, when resources need to be allocated, and determine how best to proceed when there are differing views on what actions to take. The third factor is important partnerships established at critical moments. MCB is a story of partnerships. As mentioned, the original Maduro's Bank came about between the partnerships of 2 trading companies that happened to be run by brother-in-laws, one younger and full of entrepreneurial spirit, and one older with deep business experience. The second significant partnership occurred in the early 1930s. With the impact of the Great Depression being felt on the island of Curacao, and in turn on the bank's financial position, 2 local banks decided to merge their operations. Curial's Bank, which had been founded in 1927, joined forces with Maduro's Bank in 1932, and the newly formed entity was named Maduro and Curial's Bank. This early partnership was a pragmatic move for both banks in the face of a challenging economy. The merger strengthened the capital base of the newly formed bank, eliminated the competition between the 2 banks, and brought about some economies of scale. By 1939, the Dutch Caribbean islands' economies were strong, and MCB grew its balance sheet accordingly. It was during this time that MCB expanded to the other Dutch Caribbean islands, first to Aruba, in association with the Eamon family in Aruba Bank, and later incorporating its own Caribbean Mercantile Bank, to St. Martin, where it opened the Windward Islands Bank, and then on to Bonaire. All of these operations are still running today. And however, by the late 1960s, MCB was again facing a challenging situation. Its volume of business had grown considerably, and the bank had expanded quite quickly with the establishment of the subsidiary banks in Aruba, Bonaire, and St. Martin. And they'd also opened more bank branches in Curacao. The two managing directors had reached or exceeded their normal retirement age, and its two biggest competitors had been acquired by the largest bank in Holland. Large banks such as Barclays, Citibank, and the Bank of Nova Scotia had all entered the Dutch Caribbean, prompting MCB to think about the need for it to establish some sort of association with a larger international bank. Through discussions and expressions of interest on both sides, the Bank of Nova Scotia, now commonly known as Scotiabank, and MCB came to an agreement. Scotiabank purchased 30% of the shares, and for the first time in its history, part of MCB was owned by a non-family shareholder. And thus, MCB's third significant partnership was created. It was agreed that Scotiabank would have representation on the supervisory and management boards, and over time, Scotiabank's ownership position rose to about 48%, which is where it remains today. The challenges of banking have increased, especially in the past 10 years, with much more intense focus on regulatory requirements, including know your customer, anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing, privacy, and data governance. In addition, cybersecurity and other operational risks arising from new technologies must be managed. MCB is a systemically important bank in the Dutch Caribbean. In general, the term systemically important means that the failure of such a bank could trigger an economic crisis due to its significant role in the financial system. A bank that's seen as systemically important must ensure they adhere to high standards at all times to mitigate risks and to help safeguard the broader economy. It's very difficult for an independent bank operating in smaller markets to attract and retain the global talent required to ensure regulatory compliance, to manage critical partnerships, and to provide protect customers from cybercrimes and other risks. Through the Scotiabank partnership, MCB has been able to focus their resources on areas that are specific to their business and customer needs while benefiting from knowledge sharing with Scotiabank on more global issues. This means MCB does not have to reinvent the wheel on every single new initiative and regulatory project. MCB's strongly held family values, which focus on customer service, the employee experience, and supporting the communities when combined with Scotiabank's international banking expertise, make for a powerful package. I strongly believe that MCB's decision to bring on an international banking partner in the early 1970s was decisive, the implications of which still reverberate positively today. In smaller markets, the ability to partner with another organization, either within your region or outside your region, can enable your company to benefit from the combined expertise of the two organizations. Of course, a successful partnership is not a given. There must be mutual benefit to both companies and similar values and respect between the leadership teams. Peter Godsoe, a former president and CEO of Scotiabank, stated the following in 2005 regarding these benefits. The affiliation between MCB and Scotiabank is one between a large institution and a smaller family financial group, yet it's an equal partnership that has endured. At the time of his quote, it was 35 years, now we're over 50 years, thanks to trust, empathy, mutual respect, and an understanding of each other's point of view. Many companies find it difficult to do such things. This long and successful partnership is a true tribute to the founding families of MCB and the culture of Scotiabank. And the fourth and final factor for MCB has been and continues to be effective leadership. MCB has been led by 4 CEOs since it was founded in 1917. All were members of the founding families, including MCB's current leader, Chico Capriles, who replaced his father in 2004 as the president and CEO of MCB. And all have been highly respected businessmen with an understanding of their customers' and employees' needs. Part of effective leadership is the ability to attract and retain high-quality employees who are committed to the organization. MCB has been successful in identifying and developing locally based talent, along with attracting individuals from the Netherlands and other countries to join the MCB team. While Scotiabank provides 2 employees on a rotating basis, a managing director and the chief auditor, and on occasion has had other employees work for MCB, most of the employee team is homegrown. The supervisory board and management board spend time discussing aspects of the employee experience. This includes employee satisfaction surveys, new training programs, employee town hall topics and outcomes, and succession planning, of course, for key positions in the bank. A positive feature of the employee experience with MCB is that employees can buy shares of the company and are fully supported in their volunteerism and community service days. In the summer of 2023, the Supervisory Board commissioned an organizational design review. The primary purpose of the review was to determine if the bank's current organizational structure remained appropriate for tomorrow's banking world. This review recognized the desire for to both enable the continuity and the stability of the bank for the future and to strengthen the control environment for MCB and its subsidiaries, given the increasing expectation of banking regulators. While all of us who participated in the review recognize what got us here won't get us there, to paraphrase the author Marshall Goldsmith, we also believe that MCB is in an incredibly good position to use its history and goodwill to create a viable and sustainable future. Key components of MCB's successes were identified, some of which I've already touched on today. One key strength is its community value. MCB has a 100+ year history and has historically been seen as, quote, the bank of the people, or Nos Banco. The bank and its leaders have earned the trust of families and companies on the islands through decades of working together. MCB is profitable and its finances are well managed. This ensures a stable position from which to drive change and transformation. Scotiabank's partnership provides MCB with advice and expertise through collaborative relationships among the supervisory board and management board. Talent does remain a challenge. The increasing complexity and requirements of banking mean that it's harder to find the right talent to fill these more demanding jobs. Staffing key roles requires creative solutions such as recruiting off-island, hiring for attitude and training for skills, developing internships, and being proactive in employee development discussions. With operations across the Dutch Caribbean, MCB has been able to provide development opportunities to employees who are willing to relocate to different islands for their careers. Indeed, there are a number of employees who have embraced this option for themselves and their families. The organizational design review also promoted the idea of local and global roles. Given the need for in-depth experience and knowledge for certain positions, such as compliance, aspects of risk management, IT, and anti-money laundering, these roles have been earmarked for global talent, while other positions within the bank are better suited for local talent, where strong relationships and a keen understanding of the unique local market conditions are so important. In corporate governance circles, it's often common to talk about hindsight, oversight, and foresight, all roles that a supervisory board plays throughout the course of the year. The organizational design review, to me, is a great example of foresight. Bringing in an outside view can be very valuable. Specialized consultants work with many different companies and can share structures, approaches, practices, and ideas across industries and countries to the benefit of companies with smaller footprints. This foresight enables companies to proactively plan and identify both gaps and shortfalls that need to be addressed now to avoid bigger issues in the future. Chiku Capriles, our long-serving CEO, announced his intention to retire at the bank's annual general meeting in March of this year. This is huge news for the bank and its stakeholders. Chiku, following in his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather's footsteps, has led the bank with clear enthusiasm, dedication, and pride in the bank's success. Any change in leadership impacts employee, customer, and community perceptions and must be managed thoughtfully. It's also huge news for the supervisory board, as under the 2-tier governance structure, the supervisory board is responsible for recommending all managing directors, including the CEO, to the shareholders for their approval of the appointment. The supervisory board has hired a global executive search firm to help identify candidates, assess their fit to the candidate profile, and support the process more broadly. Chiku's upcoming retirement is also huge news for the family shareholders, as this will be the first time in the bank's history that it will not be led by a family member and a shareholder. Research into family-owned companies show that only 3% survive the transition from Generation 1 to Generation 4. MCB has done this and more. However, the time has come for a non-family member to lead the company. This is not to say that family members are not involved with MCB. Indeed, 2 descendants currently serve as supervisory board directors, one whom I believe is listening to this presentation today. With all of this in play, how does MCB, the supervisory board, and more specifically the family shareholders, ensure that MCB continues to exhibit the family values that have led the bank over the past 107 years of business? First and foremost, the supervisory board, with the assistance of the executive search firm, is looking for a new leader who understands the importance of MCB's family legacy and can demonstrate that their values align with the family and the Dutch Caribbean communities. MCB, with its long track record of appointing leaders from the founding families, has instilled a sense of identity and purpose. This shared history helps define who MCB is, and it shapes the way management and the supervisory boards think about vision, strategy, and entrepreneurship. MCB also recognizes the importance of customer and employee views. As part of an ongoing feedback process, the management and supervisory boards can ensure that the values remain relevant and are effectively implemented. The annual general meeting is well attended by the family shareholders, virtually and in person, and family opinions are shared both throughout via comments and questions. This assists the respective boards to remain focused on family values and legacy while adjusting as necessary to address changes in the business and regulatory environments. It has been MCB's ability to respond to shifting market needs and expectations that has stood it in good stead. And during this presentation, I've touched on 4 key aspects: strong corporate governance practices, clarity of vision, important partnerships, and effective leadership. In summary, I'd like to highlight some consistent themes. One of the founders of Majuros Bank, Joseph Alvarez Correa, put customer focus front and center and built a reputation for being there during good times and bad times. Customer focus remains a key tenet of MCB's mission, and it is part of the family values that guide management and supervisory boards. The family shareholders and management team have successfully moved from the initial partnership between 2 brother-in-laws to a bank merger between 2 local banks to bringing in a larger bank partner. And in doing so, the bank was continually responding to the market environments. As mentioned, both the management and supervisory boards have a mix of family and Scotiabank appointees. While each director is nominated by one of the 2 shareholder groups, we all come together to wear the big MCB hat and focus on what's best for the company. MCB recognized the importance of ESG well ahead of its time. The values of MCB led it to naturally want to protect the islands and to support the communities where they live and work. Governance has also been important. The first time audited financial statements were presented to the board of directors was in 1939, well ahead of many other banks. MCB continues to embrace good governance practices, some of which I've touched on today. With the continuing involvement of the family shareholders, the bank shows respect for where it has come from, embracing the values established by the founders and leaders over the years. However, the family has also allowed both the management board and supervisory board to move with the times, such that the bank is not stifled by its history. Instead, the dual legacy of banking as trust and banking as people have given MCB the ability to evolve and succeed throughout its 107-year history. I'll stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. Thank you.
Wow. Isla, that was such an amazing presentation and story. You know, if we were in a physical room, I'll be asking everyone to stand and give a round of applause. You know,
Thank
for
you.
this is such a tremendous story. And when we talk about corporate governance and improving practices, we sometimes also focus on the challenges and problems and corporate greed and all the things that's been adversely impacting. But it is so wonderful when we can sometimes take the opportunity to celebrate stories like yours. like what we have just heard for MCB Bank out of Curacao. I think this was really, really amazing. And thank you so much for taking the time to put together this for us and come and deliver here this morning.
Thank you.
So I want to begin the discussion a bit and make an alignment between what you have shared and what we have. And we do have a third generation family
I
business
saw that.
director.
Yeah.
Yes, in Islay, who spoke earlier in the week in one of the panel presentation and who had done a governance live with me. And one of the things that came across very strongly from him, and I'm hearing it from you now, is the values. What are the underlying values which would have helped stabilize this organization, help it through the challenges and its growth path over the last more than 100 years? So
Yes.
you mentioned three that I captured very quickly: trust, empathy, and mutual respect. And over the last a few days, we have had several conversations around this particular value of trust. This is where a lot of the breakdown begins in the practices around the corporate governance. So I would imagine it helps that they were family members who first would have gotten together. They're protecting the family legacy. So they will ensure that they have these values. But then you also shared, and this is something pretty similar to G.A. Rowe and Sons as well, as Alistair shared. The family members have been able to engage in partnerships by opening themselves and welcoming non-family members. And that began in a big way with the partnership with Scotiabank. I'm seeing here. So can you share with us what helps in preserving these values in the organization? How does the board ensure that the values are up front and center and guides the organization and how it sets its tone and culture?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, we talk a lot about, because our board is composed of both directors who are appointed by the family and directors who are appointed by Scotiabank. We talk a lot about when we're at the board table, we need to wear the big MCB hat. So I'm not there on behalf of Scotiabank, Jackie's not there on behalf of the family, but rather our mutual interest is the growth and sustainability and success of MCB itself. So part of that, and we will hold each other accountable. If somebody starts going down a path that appears that there's maybe some vested interest, we will hold people accountable for that. For the board to be successful, we have to be open and honest and transparent with each other. And as I said, we will challenge each other. We also challenge the management board, but in discussions, we talk things through. I think coming from Scotiabank, we tend to be more profit oriented and, where's our NIAT? What are we doing? Whereas the family members and the family appointees, many who live on the islands where the bank has operations, challenge us more to think about more broadly, what is the impact on the community as a whole? How do we continue to be Nos Banco for so many of our customers? And so it really is an ongoing balance between ensuring that the bank is successful and profitable for ongoing operations, but also respecting where the bank has come from and its history. And in preparing for this presentation, MCB did publish a history book. I think it was maybe at their, I don't know, maybe 85th anniversary or something. It's a little out of date. But one of the early chapters in the book, I think, really highlights the values that were developed by the founders and still permeate the bank today. And the example was during the Depression in the 30s, when the two banks ended up merging, Madeira and Curials, the downtown area that you see behind me, the historical district, was really suffering. Stores were closing, nobody had money, and the bank held charges on a lot of the buildings in Punda. And the bank had to make a decision, are we going to call our loans and take over these buildings and sell them probably at a loss, or are we going to work with our customers and get through this terrible situation? And they decided to work with the customers. And that was, that was a big decision, obviously, for the board and the leaders to make. But it, to me, demonstrated that because it's a locally based bank, they put, there's always weight given to what locally needs to be done. And it's not just about, sending profits to some head office off island. It's very much about how do we succeed in our own place, our communities where we live and work.
Mm-hmm. That is so incredible because, my mind immediately went to, so here's a bank that dealt with a Great Depression, let's say, for your region, and look at the outcome we face today. The very opposite of what triggered the financial crisis that created real problems for companies around the world. So I wish we had more bankers in present here today. So we'd be sure to share this story more widely as well. So we don't always see the banks as the enemy and the ones that would contribute to problems, but can in fact be that stabilizing force when we're going through our hardest times. So we do have a question in the chat, and I know Jackie would have the opportunity to ask you this question directly, but I'm happy that she's asking you in everyone's presence so we get a chance to hear. So Jackie, do you want to unmute? We'd be happy to have you ask your question directly to Islay. And she's asking about the next 100 years.
Yeah, I see it in the chat there. I'll go ahead and answer that. I mean,
all right. Well, let me read it out fully for everyone to hear, just as we haven't seen Jackie unmute. So her question is, what do you think the bank needs to succeed another 100 years as a key bank of the region? Great question.
Well, on my crystal ball, I think the biggest challenges facing the banks, all the banks right now, is the overwhelming regulatory requirements. And certainly, the banks need to be gatekeepers to the financial services industry. And so in order to maintain the integrity of our financial systems, the banks have to stop bad money getting in. And, the banks haven't necessarily been as good at this historically. And so the regulators' expectations are increasing. In Curacao, actually, we have the CFATF examination coming up later this month, where Curacao as an island will be looked at to see how we are dealing with money laundering, terrorism financing, proliferation financing, all of the things that, we're trying to block. So I do think in the short term, all the banks, including MCB and its subsidiaries, need to have a very clear understanding and process and procedure in place to prevent bad money getting into our bank and entering the financial system for all the islands in the Caribbean and beyond. But I think longer term, the success of the bank has been based on, as I said, it's two things: successful partnerships, recognizing when the situation is such that you don't have the capabilities or the skills or the knowledge to proceed, and having the humility to admit that and go out and find that right partner and enter the partnership as an equal, not as an underling. I think that's, they've demonstrated they can do that. And I think, at some point there may need to be another partnership, who knows? So that would be one thing. And then the other thing I think, and I touched on this in my presentation, is MCB has shown a very capable ability to read what's going on in the environment and make, adjust accordingly, whether it's partnerships, whether it's, expanding, whatever it might have been at the time. And so I think that ability to, look forward, that foresight, as I called it, don't be shy to hire people or to bring in experts to help you figure out what's around the corner. But yeah, I think, MCB has a good track record, and, certainly at the supervisory board, we're doing everything we can to make sure it's around for another 100 years or more.
Yes, and I love that answer, being gatekeepers of the financial system so you don't allow bad money in, and also not just the partnerships, but really being so alert to the changes in the environment. Things that every board, I think, need to consider as well.
Yeah,
So
one
we
of just to touch on that, one of the favorite expressions, a friend of mine who is a board director, she talks about being able to see around the corners, which I think is really what boards have to do, right? You have to be, such as these events, CCGI, they give you information and ideas on how better to be a committed and a proactive board member by, literally seeing around corners.
we're definitely going to take that and we're going to be sharing that because that's going to help us promote the work we're doing here with CCGI. So thank you, Islay.
You're welcome.
All right. And we also now have a comment and question from Alistair. He's on the road at the moment, so he's not going to be able to unmute and ask himself. So he says to you, really clear and great presentation. We all agree. So he's asking now, what has been some ways that the supervisory and management boards have confronted and ways they have overcome it?
So
Confront,
kind of the
you have a
knocking of,
specific, yeah, maybe that's what
yeah,
he means. Have they had conflict
right,
between
where the
the
management
supervisory and
board and
management?
the supervisory board don't
Yeah,
necessarily see eye to eye.
right. Yes, he did
Okay.
confirm that. Yes.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, we certainly have that. The management board obviously runs the bank. And so sometimes I think they feel we get over our skis on, asking questions. I think what we say to the management board is when we have confidence, we're happy to stand back. If we don't have confidence, then human nature is that you're going to drill in to ask questions. So, over the 6 years that I've been on the supervisory board, it waxes and wanes. We have moments where we all get along really well. And we have moments where there's more tension in the room. But I do think the regulatory area is probably the one area that we would, I guess, butt up against each other the most, because for the supervisory board, we can never move quickly enough. We need to make sure that we're meeting regulatory expectations and that we're doing the right thing. And, we talk about no compliance, no bank, right? Like it's as simple as that. If we're out of compliance, we're in trouble. For the management board, who actually has to implement all the policies, procedures, hire the people, structure the programs, they can't move as quickly. And so I would say that's probably our biggest area. But in general, back to, we all wear our big MCB hat and we all are there with good intentions. We might have different views on how to get there, but I think, it's back to trust, right? We trust each other to do what needs to be done.
Okay, great. So just to let persons know, you can, of course, raise your hands if you want to speak directly with Islay, ask a question or make a comment. Or, of course, you can continue putting your comments in the chat and I will draw it to her attention. And Islay, another thing that I thought was an incredible share from you this morning was when you spoke of effective leadership. Later down, you spoke about their role as leaders within the boardroom, and you mentioned the three words together: hindsight, oversight,
Yeah.
and foresight. So that is such a nice, incredible way of really encapsulating the role of directors generally. There'd be some hindsight when you look at the historical information through our data. And so oversight, which is the responsibility to make sure you understand what's happening at the moment. But then you also need foresight to see, as you term it, see around the corner.
That's right. Yeah, and we struggle. I mean, every board struggles. We struggle to get, we're constantly questioning ourselves. Are we spending enough time on foresight? And are we spending too much time on hindsight? What were the financial figures from the last quarter? And oversight, which in a bank is easy to do because there is such a regulatory responsibility. But I think we're getting better, but we do, hold ourselves accountable for that. And we do every second quarter, we have a closed session just with the board at the end of the board meeting, so an in camera. And we talk about that. Did we spend too much time in the historical and not enough time in the future, and try to really balance it? But it's not always easy given what's on the agenda and the responsibilities that we have.
So
There is
clearly
another question in the chat I see there too.
or from Philip Lewis.
Yeah.
So he says, his question, which board has oversight of digital transformations and specifically cybersecurity, and how are they doing that? Great question, Philip. Thank you.
So yeah, with the two-tier board, the supervisory board is ultimately responsible for the overall direction of the bank. So clearly digital transformation is part of the overall direction of the bank. And, you know, that and cybersecurity comes along with that. So we, we would say, obviously, if the management board hadn't figured this out, we need to do digital transformation and we need to be worried about cybersecurity. They in turn develop the policies and the processes and staff, the jobs that are required to deliver on all of this, and then keep us informed. And we challenge, we do effective challenge on what they're recommending or proposing. Cybersecurity, as I mentioned in my presentation, Scotiabank does help MCB with cybersecurity in quite a large way, because obviously Scotiabank with 90,000 employees and, a huge operation both in the Caribbean, Canada, and in Latin America, have developed a lot of awareness and techniques to help fight cybercrime. So some of that is very beneficial for MCB. That's where the partnership really benefits. Digital transformation, it's a slower process. We're certainly working on it, but it's like all banks, it's big investments. And as I mentioned in my presentation, not every customer wants to do digital. And so it's that balance between respecting our local markets needs, but also making sure that we're meeting customer expectations as they evolve and change. But in general, the supervisory board is responsible for the direction of the bank. The management board delivers what has been set out for them. So they deliver on the strategy.